Imagine standing at the edge of everything you've built and watching it collapse. 1 minute, you're thriving, your dreams aligned, your efforts paying off. The next, those dreams are swept away like debris in a flood. That's what happened to Jordan in Asheville, North Carolina, when a flash flood obliterated his family's cabin rental business in a single night. Insurance refused to help. Clients vanished. Banks called. And amid the wreckage, Jordan realized something far more terrifying than losing everything. He had no control over the disaster. But then, something unexpected happened. As the water receded, Jordan felt a stillness inside, an eerie calm that didn't match the chaos around him. In that silence, he faced the most important question. What do you do when your world spins out of your hands? Jordan didn't scream. He didn't collapse. He breathed, because he had discovered the secret the Stoics have known for centuries. The real power isn't in what you can change, it's in how you choose to respond to what you cannot. The choices you make in that stillness define you far more than any external force. So here's where your heart grabs a hold of the story. Did Jordan survive by gritting his teeth and desperately trying to rebuild the business exactly as it was? Or did he find something deeper, something that could never be swept away by floodwaters? The answer lies not in the water that raged through his home, but in the boundary he drew inside his mind, the Stoic boundary between what he could control and what he couldn't. And this is where your journey begins too, because we all know that feeling. The sky darkens with bad news, an email pings with unexpected results, or a relationship falls apart. In those moments, you stand on the edge, and what you do next shapes everything. Do you waste your energy screaming at the sky, or do you glance inward, ask one question, and move forward with clarity? In this opening chapter, we'll explore how Jordan used that crucial divide to not only survive, but to build something new, stronger, and more aligned than anything he had before. You'll feel the tension of watching dreams wash away. You'll live his first breath of possibility, and you'll see why recognizing control and letting go of what's not yours to carry is the most powerful act of resilience you can make. But before we dive deeper, if this resonates, if you've ever felt the walls around you shake and wondered how you'd stand, hit subscribe. Support this channel so we can continue bringing these real, human stories of transformation forward. Your presence here matters more than you know. And now let me ask you, what would you do in Jordan's place? A. I'd do everything to rebuild. The exact way it was. B. I'd focus on rebuilding stronger, with new purpose. Comment A or B below. I want to hear your choice. Brielle never imagined that her greatest test would come not on a mountain, but in a sterile rehab center. As an avid climber and former track athlete from Denver, Colorado, she was no stranger to physical pain. Twisted ankles, sore muscles, bruises, those were familiar, even welcome. But nothing prepared her for the day she misjudged a climb, fell hard, and shattered the lower part of her spine. The doctors were clinical. You might walk again, they said, but don't count on running. She smiled back, not out of defiance, but because she already knew something they didn't. Stoics like Seneca believed we should train for adversity before it arrives, rehearsing hardship so it doesn't unravel us when it hits. That mindset, called premeditatio malorum, became Brielle's lifeline. From her hospital bed, she didn't hope. She didn't daydream about miracles. Instead, she practiced, not just physical therapy, but mental flexibility. She imagined the worst, then made peace with it. I may never run again, she whispered one morning, but I will still move forward. This wasn't false positivity. It was mental conditioning. The kind that separates those who survive trauma from those who are transformed by it. Brielle embraced discomfort like it was a training partner. Not because she enjoyed it, but because she recognized it as essential. Pain, when faced directly, becomes fuel. Resistance becomes resilience. Each morning at rehab, she did the things that hurt. She allowed the burn. She listened to her body without letting it dominate her mind. The therapists noticed something rare. She never asked, "Why me?" Instead, she asked, "What now?" Every win, no matter how small, a toe twitch, a longer stretch, a steadier breath, she celebrated internally, not because they meant she was closer to running, but because they proved her spirit hadn't atrophied. This is the Stoic path, not a life without pain, but a life strengthened by it. To the Stoics, comfort is not a goal, it's a distraction. Brielle's old life had been about performance. Now, it was about persistence. And slowly, as the seasons changed outside her window, something changed inside her too. Her identity was no longer tied to motion, but to meaning. People around her couldn't understand it. "How do you stay so calm?" they asked. "Aren't you afraid of what you've lost?" But Brielle hadn't lost. She had shifted. She began mentoring other patients, sharing her journal entries, leading breathing workshops from her wheelchair. Her adversity became not just a story, but a strategy. Embracing discomfort isn't about chasing suffering. It's about no longer being shocked by it. Life is pain, unpredictability, loss and growth. The difference is what you do with it. Brielle's story shows that the most profound resilience comes not after the pain is gone, but while it still lingers. She didn't wait to be whole again to start living. She lived through the fracture and, in doing so, found a deeper wholeness than she ever had before. That's what the Stoics were trying to tell us all along. Don't run from discomfort. Invite it in, study it, walk with it until it no longer controls the room. Because when you've trained your mind to stay steady in the storm, no setback can shake the foundation you've built inside. And when you embrace discomfort not as an enemy, but as your instructor, you stop waiting for the world to get easier. You start getting stronger. That's resilience. That's Stoicism. And that's Brielle. Every morning, Elias steps into the vineyard just as the fog lifts. The dew clings to the vines like memories, and the earth breathes under his feet. It's quiet, here almost sacred. Yet for Elias, every day begins with a whisper of grief. This land in Napa Valley was meant to be a place of retirement, of joy shared with Mira, his wife of 38 years. But Mira passed suddenly. No long goodbye, no final conversation. Just silence, and a house that now feels too big. Grief, if left unattended, can grow wild like unpruned vines. But Elias chose a different path, not to erase the pain, but to reframe it. He turned to gratitude, not as a cliché or empty comfort, but as survival. Practicing gratitude, to him, became an act of defiance against despair. And it wasn't grand gestures. It was small moments, deliberate ones. He started every morning by writing down 3 things he was grateful for. Some days, it was my favorite coffee mug. Other days, it was the way the morning light hit the hills. On harder days, it was just the memory of her laughter echoing through the kitchen. Gratitude didn't cancel his sadness, it created space beside it. That's what Stoicism teaches us. Gratitude isn't about pretending everything's fine. It's about recognizing what remains even when so much is lost. Marcus Aurelius, who buried children and ruled an empire in chaos, still found time to list blessings in his journal. Not because life was gentle to him, but because gratitude kept him grounded when life became unbearable. Elias carried that same spirit. Each evening, he walked between the vines and whispered thanks, not just for the harvests, but for the trials, because the trials had shaped him. The loneliness sharpened his appreciation for connection. The quiet reminded him of how much love had once filled the air. Gratitude didn't erase Myra's absence. It deepened his sense of her presence. One afternoon, Elias found a small box Myra had left behind, filled with scraps of paper. Each one a note of gratitude she had written in secret. Thank you for singing in the kitchen. Thank you for making coffee even when you're tired. Thank you for holding my hand when no one is watching. It wasn't a grand declaration. It was her daily practice, and in finding it, Elias felt a kind of reunion. Gratitude became their shared language, one that survived even death. People often misunderstand resilience. They think it's about pushing through, being tough, staying unaffected. But real resilience, Stoic resilience, is much quieter. It's about returning again and again to what's good, even if it's small, especially if it's small. Elias now teaches this to his grandchildren. They sit with him beneath the olive tree, each naming one thing they're thankful for. It's never money or possessions. It's simple things: cream, hugs, stories before bed. They are learning early what Elias learned through loss. Gratitude is not a reward you earn. It's a practice you choose. Life will take things from you. It will leave you breathless, confused, even bitter. But in those moments, the Stoics invite you to pause, to look around, to anchor yourself not in what's missing, but in what remains. Because even when the world feels hollow, something beautiful still breathes within it, waiting to be named, noticed, held. Elias still misses Samira. That will never change. But in practicing gratitude, he keeps her alive not in mourning, but in memory. Not as a shadow, but as light. And every thank you he writes, every vine he tends, every breath he takes in reverence becomes a tribute to both her love and his strength. That's the quiet miracle of gratitude. It won't undo your loss, but it will reshape your heart. And from that new shape, you will rise not untouched, but unbroken. Samira used to believe her life would follow a script: work hard, rise steadily, and eventually reach a point where effort would be enough. As an architect in Chicago, she was methodically, every blueprint precise, every decision measured. But life doesn't follow blueprints. It redraws itself mid-construction. And when her firm suddenly lost a major contract, the fallout was swift. Projects were cut. Her team was dissolved. And Samira, who had always been the problem solver, was now labeled part of the problem. She sat in her car that night for 2 hours, watching the city lights blink across the skyline like they were taunting her. A decade of work, weekends skipped, holidays shortened, and it all vanished over one phone call. At first, she was consumed by it. She replayed every meeting, every conversation. Was there something she missed? Something she could have done differently? But no amount of analysis changed the outcome. What did change was how she chose to see it. Stoicism doesn't promise a perfect life. It teaches you to see life more clearly. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Choose not to be harmed. You won't feel harmed." That line echoed in Samira's mind as she took her first walk along the lake a week later. For the first time in years, she wasn't rushing to meet a deadline. She was just still. And in that stillness, a new question formed. What if this wasn't the end of her story, but the middle? Perspective doesn't erase pain. It. Samira began to step back, as if viewing her life from a wider lens. Instead of seeing herself as a failure, she saw a chapter closing, making room for something else. She started volunteering with Habitat for Humanity, using her skills in ways that directly impacted families. No ego, no pressure, just pure contribution. And in those quiet builds, she started to remember why she became an architect in the first place. Sometimes we forget the bigger story because we're so zoomed in on the current sentence. That's where Stoicism offers a powerful lens. By imagining your life from a mountaintop view from the perspective of years ahead, you begin to see how temporary today's crisis is. You realize that the moments you thought were ruining everything were actually redirecting you. Samira didn't bounce back quickly. This wasn't about speed. It was about depth. She took time to examine what she truly valued, what kind of legacy she wanted her work to leave. And eventually, she started her own studio, not to compete with others, but to create with intention. She chose projects aligned with her ethics, her community, and her joy. What she once saw as a career-ending collapse turned out to be a course correction. One she would have never chosen, but one that ultimately led her closer to who she was meant to be. When we cultivate perspective, we stop treating our worst moments like the whole story. We begin to see them as scenes, necessary ones, because some lessons can't be taught gently. Some clarity only comes through fire. But on the other side of that fire is vision if you choose to look. Samira often revisits that lake, the same bench where she sat wondering if her life had just crumbled. But now, she sits with gratitude, not because she got everything back, but because she gained what matters, Mara, deeper understanding of herself, and a peace that doesn't rely on circumstances. Perspective is your anchor when the ground shifts. It reminds you that storms don't last, and that sometimes the detour is the actual path. And when you see that clearly, you stop fighting what happened and start learning from it. That's the Stoic way. That's resilience through vision. That's Samira's story. Liam had always been known for his ideas. In Austin's buzzing tech scene, he was seen as a rising star coder with a creative edge and a relentless drive. At 32, he'd already co-founded 2 startups and had just launched his third, a mental health app designed to combine neuroscience with daily emotional check-ins. Investors were excited, friends celebrated, and the future looked promising. Until it did, and single quotes, 3 months after launch, the numbers didn't add up. Downloads were lower than expected, retention was dismal, and when a larger, more polished competitor hit the market, investors pulled out almost overnight. Within weeks, Liam found himself staring at the empty office space he could no longer afford to lease. The product failed. He failed, or so he thought. Failure, in our culture, is treated like a stain, something to hide, to clean, to explain away. But to the Stoics, failure is a forge. It's where illusions burn off, and character is hammered into shape. Epictetus said, "Circumstances don't make the man, they only reveal him to himself." And in those sleepless nights after the collapse, Liam finally met a version of himself he'd never seen. He was humbled, but not broken, and humility, he discovered, was fertile ground for something deeper than success. Wisdom. At first, Liam wanted to fix everything, rebuild fast, prove he still had it. But the rush to redeem himself only deepened the sense of failure. So he paused. He shut off the noise and started journaling every day, not about what went wrong, but what it taught him. He read the feedback that once felt like daggers and began to see patterns, not in code, but in himself. In how he ignored warnings, in how he equated speed with significance, in how he sought validation instead of clarity. Reframing failure wasn't about pretending the losses didn't hurt. It was about mining them for meaning. Liam realized the app didn't fail because he was incapable. It failed because it was rushed, misaligned, disconnected from real user needs. And that realization didn't break him, it recalibrated him. He returned to conversations he once dismissed, sat down with therapists, neuroscientists, and even the early users who'd deleted the app, not to pitch, just to listen. What emerged from those talks wasn't a better product. It was a better Liam, one who no longer measured his worth by market response, but by whether he was building something that truly served. Failure became his fuel. It slowed him down enough to see clearly. It forced him to detach from the ego of the next big thing and reconnect with why he started in the first place, to help people feel less alone, less overwhelmed, more in control of their emotions. From that place, he began rebuilding, not with urgency, but with intention. Liam's new project wasn't an app, it was a series of workshops in local schools and community centers, using the same core concepts in analog form. No buzz, no press, just impact. And slowly, the story of his failure transformed. Investors who once walked away began to take notice, not because he promised returns, but because he embodied resilience. Reframing failure is one of the hardest things you'll ever do. It demands that you face the disappointment, the embarrassment, the ache and still believe you're not defined by it. Stoicism doesn't sugarcoat the pain, it simply asks, now that this has happened, what will you do with it? Liam chose growth. He chose depth over speed. He chose to build something that mattered, even if it didn't trend. And in that choice, he proved what the Stoics have always taught. Failure is not the end. It's the entrance to the truth. So the next time something you've built falls apart, remember Liam. Sit with the wreckage. Study it. Don't rush to move on. Let it move you into clarity, into strength, into something better than success. Let it forge you. Celeste had always been fiercely independent. Growing up in Brooklyn, she learned early that strength meant handling things on your own, no handouts, no whining, no showing weakness. She carried that mindset through her career, her relationships, and even through the loss of her mother, whom she cared for during a long illness. But there came a moment, years later, when the silence in her apartment didn't feel like peace anymore. It felt like isolation, and strength, once a badge of honor, began to feel like a cage. She had built a life that looked solid from the outside: stable job, a clean apartment, a few surface-level friendships, but inside, she felt hollow. It wasn't a dramatic fall or a specific crisis that brought her to this point. It was the accumulation of small, unspoken burdens she had carried alone for too long. And on one particularly gray Sunday, while scrolling through her phone with no one to text, no one to call, she realized self-reliance wasn't sustaining her anymore. It was starving her. Stoicism teaches us resilience, but it also teaches us connection. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What brings no benefit to the hive brings none to the bee." We are made for interdependence. Strength is not weakened by community, is magnified by it. Celeste didn't know how to begin. Vulnerability felt foreign, even risky. But one evening, she walked into a grief support group in the neighborhood community center, not to speak, just to listen. And what she heard weren't polished narratives or dramatic breakdowns. They were honest, trembling voices. People who were surviving things that didn't fit neatly into words. And something inside her shifted. She wasn't alone in her silence. She was surrounded by others who had also taught themselves to suffer quietly. Week by week, Celeste returned, not just to sit, but to share. At first, just fragments, a memory here, a sentence there. But as she spoke, she felt the weight start to lift, not because the pain was gone, but because it was held by many. There's a profound kind of healing that happens when someone else simply says, "Me too." It doesn't fix anything, but it makes everything feel a little more bearable. Community became her strength. Not just the grief group, but the neighbors she once passed without eye contact. The woman in the bodega who remembered her favorite coffee, the barista who asked about her day and actually listened. The friendships she once kept at a distance slowly deepened, not because she had changed who she was, but because she had allowed herself to be seen, and in being seen, Celeste discovered something powerful. Resilience is not just about enduring hardship. It's about not having to endure it alone. She began organizing monthly potlucks in her building, inviting everyone, even those she barely knew. They brought dishes from different countries, sat on folding chairs, shared stories that rarely came up in everyday life. Slowly, a community formed, not out of convenience, but out of shared struggle, out of a quiet agreement that none of them had everything figured out, and that was okay. Stoicism doesn't mean emotional isolation, it means clarity, and part of that clarity is knowing when to open up, when to lean in, and when to let others help carry the load. Celeste's greatest act of strength wasn't holding it together. It was reaching out when everything in her pride told her not to. In today's world, where loneliness is an epidemic, choosing community is a radical act. We've been taught that independence is the goal, but interdependence, the mutual exchange of strength, empathy, and presence is what truly sustains us. Celeste now lives differently, not loudly, not dramatically, but intentionally. She doesn't hide when she's struggling. She doesn't pretend when she needs rest. And in doing so, she's given others permission to do the same. Her story reminds us that while self-discipline shapes us, it's connection that restores us. No one gets through life without scars. But when we gather, when we choose to show up, share, and support, we turn those scars into stories, into bridges, into strength. So if you've been walking your path alone, carrying more than anyone sees, remember this: you don't have to keep doing it that way. Community is not a crutch, it's a cornerstone. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is sit beside someone and say, "I'm tired too." That's where real strength begins, not in solitude, but in solidarity. Let's bring everything together in this final reflection and summary. Please hold on while I craft a rich and emotionally resonant 800-word conclusion based on the full story arc. In every chapter of their journey, Jordan, Samira, Liam, Celeste found themselves face to face with a moment that shattered their expectations of control, comfort, and certainty. These weren't just isolated crises. They were crucibles, moments that cracked the shell of who they thought they needed to be and revealed something deeper beneath. The essence of resilience. Jordan, standing in the wreckage of his business, chose not to rebuild the past, but to reimagine his future. He taught us that recognizing what we can't control doesn't make us powerless. It liberates us to focus our energy where it actually matters. Samira, in the silent aftermath of losing her career, didn't chase a new title. She chased perspective. And in doing so, she saw that the collapse of what was once her dream was actually the birth of her deeper purpose. Then there was Liam, who could have easily let failure define him. But instead, he paused. He listened. He let the pain teach him, and then he built something more honest, more human. He reminded us that failure is not proof you're lost. It's often proof you're on the edge of something real. And finally, Celeste, who spent most of her life believing that to be strong meant to be silent, she discovered the opposite, that real strength isn't found in solitude. It's built through shared struggle, through presence, through the bravery it takes to simply say, "I need someone." Together, their stories illuminate a powerful truth. Stoic resilience isn't about becoming immune to life's storms. It's about becoming someone who walks through them with clarity, purpose, and presence. It's not about hardening yourself. It's about deepening yourself, expanding your capacity to feel, to adapt, to keep moving with dignity, even when the path disappears. So what's the takeaway here? It's this: resilience is a practice, not a trait, not a gift, not something reserved for the chosen few. It's built moment by moment, choice by choice. Every time you choose silence over reactivity, growth over comfort, gratitude over despair, connection over isolation, you're strengthening that muscle. And here's how you bring that into your own life. Start by questioning what you're holding that isn't yours to carry. What stories are you clinging to that you can't change? What energy are you wasting on trying to control the uncontrollable? Let it go. Redirect that focus inward. Then embrace discomfort, not because you enjoy suffering, but because you understand that discomfort is where the mind grows strongest. Take cold showers. Have the hard conversations. Say no when your peace is at stake. Push yourself gently but consistently beyond what's easy. Practice gratitude like it's medicine, because it is. Every morning, name 3 things. Not grand gestures, simple things. Breath, coffee, a friend. Gratitude shifts your lens, rewires your response to adversity, and builds a mindset that sees blessings in what others overlook. See the bigger picture. When things fall apart, don't zoom in, zoom out. Ask yourself, how might this be redirecting me? Stop defining yourself by the moment and start defining yourself by how you move through the moment. Reframe your failures. Stop calling them endings. Start calling them openings. The biggest breakthroughs in your life will almost always come dressed as disappointment. And finally, build community. Reach out, not when you're strong, especially when you're not. There's no prize for suffering in silence. Let people in. Let them help you hold your load, and be there to hold theirs when they need it. This is the Stoic roadmap, not for perfection, but for presence, for inner strength, for living not above the struggle, but within it, eyes wide open, anchored, and unshaken. Now, I want to hear from you. Which of these stories resonated with you the most? Are you currently navigating a moment that's testing your resilience? Have you found your own version of strength through discomfort, gratitude, failure, or connection? Drop your thoughts in the comments, whether it's just a line or your own full story. Someone out there might need to hear what you have to say. This is how we build a stronger, more human community, through shared experience. And if this message hit home, if you felt even one moment in this video, reach go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Support this channel so we can keep delivering honest, deep, and empowering stories that help you live more fully, more intentionally, and more courageously. Because sometimes, the most powerful changes in life don't come from speaking louder. They come from living wiser. Let resilience speak. Let your story unfold. And let's grow together.